Shalom. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Chai Academy. I am Rabbi Sachs, Yaakov Sachs, coming to you from the Chai Center. So the Chai Academy is try to do this daily or a few times a week. Various classes of interest specifically related to Judaism. And we have been discussing for the past couple of weeks. We have been going through the modern day Israel. So the various stories, historic, history basically, with hopefully a touch of inspiration with it as well. So yesterday we discussed Begin and Sadat, and we also yesterday was actually the Lebanese War, the worst war Israel fought. Israel's Vietnam, as some people call it, and we spoke about Begin, we spoke about Sadat, Camp David, peace accords, and we've tried to explain the politics and the goings on of Israel and the miracles that took place as well. Today's topic, which is called the Law of Return, is probably the most contentious topic of Israel. It was true in the 70s, and it's just as true, if not more, today. The Law of Return. So the Law of Return was, Israel became a country in 1948. Well, in the summer of 1950, July 5th, 1950, the Knesset passed an unbelievable law. And this law was welcomed by everybody. The Law of Return. Basically, the law is as follows: that every Jew has a right, as an Ola, a citizenship of Israel. Now, can you imagine we had this Law of Return in 1936 and 37 and 38. Can you imagine we had this in the 40s? Can you imagine we had this Law of Return during World War One? Anytime, the Bolsheviks can you imagine we had this law? Can you imagine that Israel is a home to every single Jew if you want it? You have immediate right to citizenship. If we had that in 1938, 6 million would not have died. Instead, the British blockaded the Jews from coming into Israel and sent them back into the fires of Auschwitz and Nazi hell. So this law was applauded by every Jew. Every Jew. You have a right to citizenship. You make Aliyah. You say, I want to go live in Israel. That is your visa. You're Jewish. I want to live in Israel. That is your visa. And you can go. And they can't turn you down. Everybody else, you have to go through a process. You have to apply for citizenship. It may take you have to live there 3 years, etc. But as a Jew, it's instant. You're an instant citizen. No questions asked. Now, there's caveats. There are caveats. One caveat would be that you're against the Jewish people. You're a Jew, but you hate the Jewish people, and you try your darndest to hurt the Jewish people, and then you do not have that right to be a citizen. So, if you're a traitor, you're treason to the Jewish people. It's difficult to, what the definition of treason is. I have my definite definition. Somebody who constantly puts Jews in danger by their rabid politics, and cause, to me, Israel shouldn't allow you. I'm so surprised when Code Pink, they let them into Israel, and all they do is create havoc. I'm so surprised that they let Ariel Gold, for example, but that's my politics. I don't know if they do let Ariel Gold. I mean, I've heard different things, but also if you're a public health issue, you come to Israel and you have all sorts of diseases, they have a right to say, no, you can't be a citizen, and you have to go into quarantine, and you have to, etc. But otherwise, barring that, if you're Jewish, you're an immediate citizen of Israel. Now, that law was embraced pretty much by all Jews. I mean, this is it. This is the difference of 1950 versus 1940 was we have this law of return. So it was embraced. There were critics of this law that and by the way, why was this law created? For two reasons. One, that no Jew should ever feel that they don't have a homeland, they don't have a place to run to upon danger, as the former Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, etc. Also, was to bring more Jews into Israel. There's 20% of Israel is Israeli Arabs, and to make sure Israel remains Jewish, they need to bring in more people. So because they have to bring in more people, they're making it easy. So it was criticized as this non-democratic law that only Jews can have immediate citizenship. Arabs don't necessarily have immediate citizenship. So it was criticized, but for the most part, it was free sailing. And free sailing to 1970. There was a test to this law in 1962, a very famous story of Brother Daniel. Daniel Rifeisen, he was born Oswald Rifeisen, and he came into Israel in 1962, and he said, I want to be an immediate citizen because I'm born Jewish. The problem was with Daniel Rifeisen is that he converted to Catholicism, and he was a brother. I don't know exactly what he was, but he was either a priest or a monk. I don't know exactly, but he was not. He said I'm a born Jew, but I am not a Jew currently. It went all the way up to Israel's Supreme Court, and they determined that the law of return is specifically for current Jews. So if you've given up, if you've abandoned your Jewish faith, then you're not recognized as a citizen, but rather Brother Daniel had to go through the process of applying for citizenship as a non-Jew would. It was somewhat challenged, and people were upset, but most people were okay with that law. In 1969, they amended the law, and basically they said that what's a definition of a Jew? The definition of a Jew is anybody, whether you have a Jewish mother or a Jewish father. Now, that made the rabbinate in Israel, which is under Orthodox auspices, that drove them crazy. Because they said, no, Judaism is recognized by the mother. Right? You are a Jew if you have a Jewish mother, and if you have a Jewish father, you're not a Jew if you don't have a Jewish mother. So if there's a Jewish father with a Jewish mother, the child is not Jewish. And the child would require conversion. So the rabbinate went crazy, and therefore, in 1970, they expanded the law, right, because of this challenge in 1969. In 1970, they expanded the law, and it was, if you're a child of a Jew, you're a grandchild of a Jew. You are a spouse of a Jew. The criteria, however, is you have to have a Jewish mother. So if you're a child of a Jew, you can come immediately get, which a child of a Jew is a Jew, but you have to have a Jewish mother. And that's what they added in, is you have to have a Jewish mother. Now, that created more controversy than the 1969 one, where you have to have at least a Jewish father. Because the Reform and Conservative, you have to have a Jewish mother, and you have to be converted, I missed that one point. You have to have a Jewish mother, or you have to convert, and a conversion of you have to be converted by a Beth Din, and it has to be a recognized conversion. Reform and conservative went crazy because in Israel, United States, the Reform conversion is recognized as a conversion, definitely amongst the Reform. A conservative conversion is recognized as a conversion amongst the Reform and conservative, and I think would be recognized by the government as well in the United States, but it's not recognized necessarily by the Orthodox. But in Israel, the only conversions that are recognized is Orthodox conversions. So the Reform and conservative went crazy. It says that means our converts are not recognized in Israel. Now, practically in 1970, it wasn't a practical issue because how many Reform and conservative converts moved to Israel? There was perhaps 10 a year, but it was very symbolic. So practically, you didn't have that many conversions making Aliyah. But you had the potential, which would now be thwarted. You also had as follows. You had a problem as follows. Intermarriage in the United States has been going on for a long time. It's been going on as from the 70s and the 80s, and it got more and more. And in the 70s and 80s, it was 40%. In the 90s, it became 50%, and now it's 52% of Jews intermarrying. And 52%, I don't know if that's New York, and therefore Oklahoma would be 90%. I don't know. But think about it. If Israel, the rabbinate of Israel, would only accept converts from a Jewish from an Orthodox conversion, then they would not accept so many converts. There's 10,000 conversions a year, and some of them is the woman and some of them is the man. So if it's the man that's converting and marrying a Jewish girl, that's one thing. But if it's a woman that's converting, that she's not Jewish, but she's marrying a Jewish guy, if it's not done under Orthodox auspices, it's not recognized. And think of the parents who want their child to marry Jewish, and all of a sudden they're told, no, it's not Jewish, it's not recognized. So it created an incredible controversy. Incredible controversy. And till today, it is an incredible controversy. We'll continue to see what Israel tried to do, but it helped somewhat, but not totally. 1970 came, and so that was controversy from 1970 and until 1988. In 1988, it became worse because Yitzhak Shamir, when he was running to become prime minister, what he said was, let's add the words so it's formal into this law of return. So and he was trying to woo the Orthodox base. Let's add the word kahalacha according to Jewish law. So till now, it was under Orthodox, whatever the rabbinate would accept. But here he wanted to make it concrete according to halacha. So that really blew up. So from 1970 to 1988, it was fought, it was challenged, etc. But 1988, when Yitzhak Shamir said, let's make this a formal Knesset rule that has to be done kahalacha according to Orthodox law, and put that in the bill and pass it as law, really blew up in Israel's face. And basically what they decided was in 1989 that if there was a person came to Israel and they were converted in the United States, in Europe, in Africa, wherever it may be, then we'll accept them, no questions asked. Yes, it doesn't matter if you have a reform conversion, if you have a conservative conversion, we'll accept. We'll accept. However, we'll accept you, and that became the law of the Knesset. However, there are still many issues that have not been taken care of. Because if there was a reform or conservative conversion within Israel, it wasn't accepted. It was only those that came out of Israel will accept. But if it, and the rabbinate were forced to accept it because the Knesset passed the law. But within Israel, no. That has to be done according to the Israel rabbinate. And they said only Orthodoxy. So what happened was there were these non-Jews that wanted to convert. They lived in Israel. They met an American guy, came to Israel. He met a Sabra. He met an Israeli girl. And the Israeli guy wanted to convert, as an example. So in Israel, he had to convert Orthodox. Otherwise, it's not accepted. So what they did is they leapfrogged out of Israel. They went to Egypt. They went to Greece. That's probably where they went. Or Turkey. They got converted in Turkey. And then they came back, and that's fine. So, but in Israel itself, if you wanted to convert, it had to be only a certain rabbi, a kind of rabbi. So it caused them to leapfrog outside of Israel. But it didn't solve the problem, because Israel still, the rabbinate of Israel still controlled divorces and marriages. So you converted, reform conversion. You go to Israel and you want to get married. So while they said we have no choice but to accept your conversion, but we won't allow you to get married because we don't agree with this conversion. We accept the conversion, but so they control marriage and divorce. So, and that has never been reconciled. They'll accept the conversion, but they won't allow any of their rabbis who are approved to officiate in Israel, and they're very select. They won't allow them to officiate at a marriage or a divorce unless the conversion was done Orthodox. But yet they accept the Orthodox conversion because they have to. So it's kind of, it's a difficult issue. As time went on, the Israeli rabbinate actually got stricter and stricter and stricter. And now they don't accept every Orthodox conversion. If they feel that the rabbi in the United States is lenient, or they've heard that is lenient, or the convert who moves to make Aliyah doesn't know that much, they'll blacklist. And they have a blacklist. They'll deny it. But they do have a blacklist of who they approve of and who they don't approve of. And so there are, if you think about it now, there are converts who go to Israel and say, yeah, we converted. Yeah, I converted Orthodoxy. I was converted by this rabbi of this Orthodox shul, etc. And they say, no, sorry, we don't accept him. He's not on our approved list. So it creates havoc and it creates a lot of pain. And it's for this reason when someone comes to me and they sit in my office and they tell me they want to convert, I immediately tell them it's a Pandora's box. I tell them, if you want to be converted, where Israel, the rabbinate of Israel, will accept, then you have to go to a certain group of rabbis. In New York, it would be the Vaad of Queens, it would be the RCA. You can't just go to any rabbi you want, right? And the RCA, they give you their criteria and their parameters. If you don't care about being accepted in Israel, then but you still want an Orthodox, then you have a little bit of a greater rabbis to choose from. If you don't necessarily care if it's Orthodox or conservative or Reform, then you have, once again, a broader scale. But I tell them that here's the problem. If you convert Reform, then not every conservative institution is going to recognize it. So you'll be limited to Reform. If you convert conservative, Orthodoxy won't accept that conversion. So Reform may accept it, but Orthodoxy won't. So you got that problem. If you convert Orthodox, you'll have most Orthodox, but those that are real Haredi will only accept the conversion from whatever the rabbinate accepts. So it's a mess. It's a mess. So while the law of return was a great idea, and it is a great idea, and it still is a great idea, however, it's a mess, because currently, practically speaking, they'll only accept those that they approve of, and they will not accept those that they don't approve of. And even though their hands are tied in terms of that they'll accept the conversion, but that's as far as it goes. I don't even know if they'll let you into the schools there. I don't know. I don't know exactly what what they'll allow, what they won't allow, and I'm sure it could be challenged in court, etc. So when someone wants to convert, I laid down the rules, I laid down the gauntlet, and I don't do conversions because it's a sticky mess. And I just tell them, and I guide them as best as I could. So that is the law of return, and but the bottom line is that anybody that is wise should understand that having an Israel, a place where we can run to, it is an incredible thing, right? That there's politics, sure, but Israel also accepts people on humanitarian grounds as well. So, the Ethiopians the Falashan, they converted out of Judaism. So, but Israel accepted them. If it could prove their Jewishness, they accepted them. If they couldn't, they accepted them humanitarian, and made them go through a conversion. I think likewise the Soviet Union was controversy, but when the Soviet Union opened, they accepted the Soviet Union, and there's controversy because there were so many non-Russian Soviet non-Jews that came in as well, so it became somewhat of a mess. But on the humanitarian grounds, they accepted them as well. But the bottom line is that we need Israel. So all those Jews that poo-poo Israel's existence, or they want to give away land, and they have to think. They have to think: do they want Israel to exist or not? Because Israel's existence may allow their children, their grandchildren, one day to run from Europe again. So we have to be really careful what we wish for Israel. This is my opposition to Ariel Gold and her code pink, is because it hurts Israel, and you want Israel to exist as a democratic country, and you don't and as a Jewish country, and you don't want to cut its knees off constantly to the point where Israel may no longer exist, God forbid. Questions you can ask here, or rabbi@thechaicenter.com. If you wish to review other classes, it's thechaicenter.com/academy. God bless.